in today's discussion, I want to focus on the topic of free energy, which means, like I said previously, it doesn't mean that it doesn't cost anything. It has a different meaning in biology. Energy, put it up there, is basically defined as a part of a system's capacity, the energy that's in there, so that it can do work. In my two examples over here, I borrowed from your textbook. This girl on the slide has, gravitational potential energy, and she can slide down the slide. And in the process of sliding down, she is changing the potential energy into kinetic energy. All right. Think about the free energy as the distance from the top of the slide to the bottom. All right. This is the amount of energy, just in the conversion of potential to kinetic energy, that she could actually spend doing work. Doing work might be the friction of her pants against the slide, the impact of her feet against the sand. Okay? But that is, in this system right here, girl on the slide, this is the energy that's capable of doing work. Or in the system over here of example of diffusion, you got these large molecules, okay, have the capability to move. And as long as that membrane between them is permeable, those molecules will move out. The energy that expends here in movement, that is the free energy of this system. Or, as we're going to be focusing more in this class, large complex molecules being broken down into smaller molecules. In this case, carbon dioxide and water. Okay? The energy trapped in those bonds, that is the free energy. Now, free energy has several components, and we use the symbol G to signify the amount of free energy in a system. The G comes from the scientist who first developed this equation. His name was Gibbs. So this is the Gibbs free energy, which everybody just refers to it as the free energy of a system. Now, the amount of free energy of a system is dependent upon several things. First of all, the total energy of the system, which in the equation is we symbolize as letter H. The amount of disorder, or entropy, which is S, of the system. So the equation would look something like this. The change in free energy, delta G, is equal to the change in the total energy minus the amount of the change in entropy times T. And T is temperature in degrees Kelvin, absolute temperature scale. All right? That's the overall equation. Now, do you have to reproduce that on the AP exam? In the new form? I'm not sure. But it all boils down to this. Here's what they're totally looking for. If your delta G is a negative number, okay? If it's a negative number, then the energy or the change is going to be spontaneous. Spontaneous doesn't mean that it's going to occur, really fast or anything. It means that it's going to occur without an input of energy. So in these systems right up here, in a particular, this nice easy one here, in this example of the girl, in this system right here, without any further input of energy, she can slide down here and have a change in her energy state. High energy state, low energy state. That change is the free energy. And again, high concentration here. Moving in diffusion to equilibrium, get lower concentration on each side here, lower concentration here, but equal on each side. Again, we've had a change. The spontaneous change is the fact that it just occurs without any further input of energy. So in this equation, you got to figure that there's going to be a constant temperature and a constant pressure, like you would find inside of a cell. All right? Now, don't expect, on the previous AP exams, I don't remember ever seeing that you had to calculate this or anything, but just we did this here to kind of show you where it's all coming from. That you're looking at, so long as temperature and pressure are constant, the total amount of free energy in a system is equal to the total energy minus, the entropy. and entropy times the temperature in kelvins. All right? Now this is an example we're looking at here for a spontaneous change. Reactions that are exergonic, which means that they are going to release energy. Okay? Exergonic reactions would look like this. If you were to graph right here the potential energy of the reactants, so like say you've got some chemicals right up here, or let's just actually put a number to this. Let's say this is glucose up here. Glucose has X amount of free energy. That's its energy stored inside of its chemical bonds. And glucose, will break down into carbon dioxide and water. Those will be the products. The difference between the amount of energy in glucose and the amount of energy in the products, in this case carbon dioxide and water, this is the free energy. This is the amount of free energy. And if you start here and go down, then the delta G is going to be negative. And this reaction would occur spontaneously. So again, in our studies here of bioenergetics, exergonic reactions will be like cell respiration. We're going to be releasing energy. And that energy is going to be able to do work within the cell. The opposite of exergonic would, of course, be endergonic. Okay? This would be like photosynthesis, where we're taking reactants down at this end, right here. We're taking carbon dioxide and water. We are adding energy, inputting energy into this system. In this case, it's going to come from sunlight to make glucose, the products. So in endergonic reactions, or something like photosynthesis, the delta G, the free energy, is going to be positive. And this reaction, of course, then will not undergo spontaneously. You need to have that input of energy. In the cell, this free energy, if you look back at the previous slide there, exergonic reactions, that free energy that's released can't be used directly by the cell to do the cell's work. And the cell's work would involve making more DNA, preparing more materials here for replication, for cell division, basically even controlling what goes in and out of the cell. In order to meet this need, that free energy has to be converted into a form that the cell can use. And that would be this molecule here, ATP. ATP is the primary source of energy for the cell. The examples I've always used in my classes is think of this. ATP is the currency of the cell. Okay, it's the money. The example I use in my other freshman classes seems to make an impact with them. Ralston High School pays me a check. Let's go back 40 years when they actually wrote checks. Now it's direct deposit. But let's say Ralston High School 40 years ago, they write me a check. Can I take that check right to the Quickie Mart and say, give me gasoline? Obviously not. They want something that's more liquid. So I've got to take my check, in my example here, the cell, my check would be analogous to a glucose molecule. I've got to take my check or glucose molecule to the bank, and I've got to turn it into a form that I can use to buy what I need. I'll cash my check and get, $20 bills. Well, I can use those $20 bills, which would be like the ATP now, to conduct my daily business. The ATP is the cell's currency. It's what the cell uses to conduct business. Now, ATP is composed of three things. It's got an adenine group. That's this portion right here. It's got a 5-carbon sugar. That's this purple one right down here. And that 5-carbon sugar is ribose. And the third component are 3 phosphate groups, PO4. Okay? Shown right over here. 1, 2, 3. That's why it gets its name, adenosine triphosphate. And the energy stored in the phosphate bonds there, that's where transferring that third phosphate group, that's where the energy comes from to conduct all the cell's work. This is the slide that if you've had my anatomy class, you've seen this this picture before, describing what's going on with ATP, why we need it. Okay? Now, in this process here, we have to take the energy that's trapped in food and turn it into, something the cell can use. And remember, the cell can only use ATP. Okay? There's more involved here too, because the energy component of food is going to be changed into glucose. That's where it's really going to go through here. But my example here, okay, the high energy in the food, all your carbohydrates and fats have high energy. Now, you've got to do cell work over at this end. Okay? This energy, this food, the glucose, is broken down into carbon dioxide and water. So if you remember that free energy diagram, these are going to be on the low end. Glucose and everything will be on the high end. So try to imagine that energy diagram that you saw with the graph going down. High energy, high up on the free energy scale, low energy. So this transfer of energy, the high energy of the food is transferred to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, plus another phosphate, and the addition of that energy turns into ATP. In my picture here, we've got Clark Kent and Superman. Superman being high energy. Well, in order to do work then, that high energy, we transfer that phosphate. We change the phosphate to another molecule. And when we do that, the ATP becomes ADP again and goes back and waits for some more energy from the breakdown of glucose or any carbohydrates and lipids, again to regenerate ATP. So this is constantly going in a cyclic nature. The molecule that the phosphate got transferred to can now do cell work. It can cause active transport, mechanical in this point. It can recreate an electrical potential, like in nerve cells. It'll do all this stuff here for the cell, which would also include, although it doesn't have it up here, it would involve making more proteins, more organelles, all that stuff here that you see going on during interphase of cell division. But it's also going to generate some heat. And remember, this is the least organized form of energy. It's also going to generate a phosphate. Okay? And all in all then, when you transfer this around, back to the low energy, it's going to come back and the molecule will come back and pick up another phosphate and go through the whole process again. These phosphates are constantly being recycled throughout the cell, always regenerating ATP. Okay? Now remember, these are the key things to remember. ATP is going to cause that cell machinery to work by transferring that phosphate group. Okay, and all that energy, that's generated conducts all the cell's business. So as I'm sure you've guessed by now, we need this energy, and part of our focus on this unit here is to develop a better understanding of how this very important molecule is actually generated. For me personally, working as a coach, I was always fascinated with how the cells, do their work, how muscle cells contract. How can you make a stronger contraction? How can you make longer lasting contractions? How come some athletes, run for 26 miles and others barely cover a mile? And in the production of ATP, that's where the secret lies. Why are some people better sprinters? Why are some people better distance runners? It's all going to boil down to the genes that are going to make the proteins or enzymes that are going to control different parts of cell respiration.
Something else.